Greetings in the name of the Most High Yahuwah and his Son Yahusha to the 12 tribes that are scattered abroad. I am Brother Hiram, and today I am bringing forth a video to you which is entitled David and the Showbread, short version. So let's go. The purpose of this video: to summarize the previously released video entitled 5 Reasons Why David Did Not Eat the Showbread on the Shabbat, to hit the high points of that video in order to generate more interest in digging deeper into this important subject, and as a bonus, to reveal a better candidate for a Shabbat which was near the new moon celebration of 1 Samuel 20. Hallelujah. And so some of you have been through the previous video, 5 reasons why David did not eat the showbread on the Shabbat, but it's a couple hours long. And so sometimes people see a lengthy video like that and pass over it, even though I have it chopped up into chapters in the description box still, because it's long. Then some people choose not to watch it. And so for that reason, that's why I'm hitting the high points, making a shorter video. And by watching this, seeing the points of it, hopefully that will generate more interest in watching the original video. Now, on this bonus, as some of you know, that the setting for 1 Samuel 21, where David went to Nob and ate the showbread, the backdrop of that is 1 Samuel chapter 20, where we have a 2-day new moon celebration. But before the 2-day new moon celebration, we have 1 Samuel 19, which we will go through, and we will see the activities therein. And within those activities, it will reveal a better candidate for a Shabbat, which was near the new moon celebration of 1 Samuel chapter 20. So let's go through the passage at hand. This is the original passage that the original video was based upon, but we're going to go through this again. And David came to Nob to Ahimelech the Kohen. And Ahimelech trembled when he met David and asked him, "Why are you alone and no one was with you?" And David said to Ahimelech the Kohen, "The sovereign has commanded me a word and said to me, 'Let no one know whatever of the word about which I send you and which I have commanded you. And I have directed my young men to such and such a place, and now what do you have on hand? Give 5 loaves into my hand, or whatever is found.' And the Kohen answered David and said, 'There is no ordinary bread on hand, but there is Kodesh bread, provided the young men have kept themselves from women.' And David answered the Kohen and said to him, 'Truly women have been kept from us about 3 days since I came out. And the vessels of the young men are Kodesh, and it is an ordinary mission, and also it was Kodesh in the vessel today.' Then the Kohen gave him Kodesh bread, for there was no bread there except the showbread, which had been taken from before Yahuwah in order to put hot bread in on the day it was taken away." Now that is from 1 Samuel chapter 21, verses 1 through 6. So this is the passage in question. This is the passage that is used by the debunkers, by those who try to dismantle the synchronized Shabbat, and those who claim that they have found a Sabbath, a Shabbat, that does not fall on the synchronized dates of the 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th of the lunar month. And so the critical error that they make is by assuming that because David ate showbread, that day was Shabbat, as if the Shabbat was the only day that the showbread would be available. Because in this passage, especially when you look at the last verse. Nowhere in this passage does it indicate that it was Shabbat. And also, you notice how it said the Kohen gave him Kodesh bread, for there was no bread there except the showbread, which had been taken from before Yahuwah, in order to put hot bread in on the day it was taken away. And so it doesn't specify what that day was. It just says on the day it was taken away. It didn't say in order to put hot bread in on that very day that they're standing in. No, on the day it was taken away. It leaves it open. So let's go on. Now, 5 reasons why David did not eat the showbread on the Shabbat. We're going to go through each of the reasons, and then we're going to break each reason down. Number 1, David's lie to the Kohen Hagadol, because he did lie, or high priest, would not have been a believable lie if that day was the Shabbat. Number 2, the showbread was not just available to eat on the Shabbat. There was enough to eat it throughout the week. Number 3, there was no bread available except the showbread, which is highly unlikely if that day was the Shabbat. Number 4, David traveled extensively that day and the Kohen knew it. And number 5, Yahusha compared the alleged unlawful eating of his Talmudim, disciples, which with that of David when he partook of the showbread. He did not say or even imply that David did that on the Shabbat. So reason number 1, the lie that David told the Kohen Hagadol would not have been believable if that day was Shabbat. Now, David lied to the Kohen Hagadol, high priest, saying, the sovereign has commanded me a word. This is in verse 2, chapter 21. Also, the Kohen knew that he traveled there and was passing through to travel elsewhere. So him being the Kohen Hagadol, the high priest, wouldn't he think it strange that David would be doing all this traveling on the Shabbat? You know, isn't it odd that the Kohen didn't say anything to him or check him on this? And then also to say that the sovereign has commanded me a word, sent me on a mission here. Is that believable that the sovereign would send him on some mission on the Shabbat? And so if this day is supposed to be the Shabbat, this is not a very good lie. So let me show you what a much better lie looks like. When Rahab hid the spies and lied to the pursuers, she told a believable lie. The men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. Then it came to be as the gate was being shut, when it was dark, that the men went out. I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly so that you overtake them. That's from Joshua, chapter 2, verses 4 and 5. That's a believable lie. That's why those men pursued and tried to overtake men. But this which David said to the Kohen Hagadol, not a very good lie to speak to him, because there's just too many things within that would just throw up red flags if that day were the Shabbat. So that's reason number 1. Reason number 2, and this is a big one here, because this is one of the primary reasons why people believe that this day was the Shabbat, because it is a misunderstanding of all the nuances that surround the priestly orders and rituals, including putting out the showbread week by week on the Shabbat. It said the showbread was available during the week and not just Shabbat. It would have been available for about 4 days in order to supply David with 5 loaves. Praise Yahuwah. Now, there were 85 Kohanim. We see that from chapter 22, verse 18. And these are 85 Kohanim which wore the ephod. So these were Kohanim that served in the tabernacle. So there are 85 Kohanim, 85 priests in the city. Therefore, it was reasonable to say that each weekly rotation for the tabernacle would have been about 3 or 4 men, as in the days of Aharon and his sons. So when Aharon and his sons first began ministering in the tabernacle, there were 5 of them. He had 3 sons. Now, as you remember, that a couple of them died. And so it ended up just being Aharon and a couple of his sons. And so this is how many men it typically takes in order to do the orders of the tabernacle. Only the officiating Kohanim, the priests, ate of the 12 loaves of showbread that were removed from the table on the Shabbat, and they only did so in the Kodesh place. We get that from Wayikra, Leviticus chapter 29, or chapter 24, verse 9. So it's not for their families nor the Levites. So we look at the limitations of the eating of the showbread. Only the Kohanim that were on duty were the ones to eat from it, and only in the Kodesh place. They couldn't take it home, couldn't take it to their families. And here we're talking 3 or 4 men. Here we're talking 3 or 4 men. Now, there was a changing of the guard on the Shabbat, where there were incoming Kohanim and there were outgoing Kohanim. Now, there are some that suggest that both the incoming and outgoing Kohanim ate of the showbread, but that still wouldn't change anything, as you will see as we go further into this lesson. And so we see the limitations, that this wasn't just eaten of by anybody and everybody. It was a limited number of men that ate from the showbread once it was removed on the Shabbat to put the hot bread on the table. And, the hot bread would stay on the table for a week before being replaced the next Shabbat. Now, and this is probably the most important nuance to pay attention to when it comes to the showbread. Now, if you look at the long version, I actually have illustrations of what the showbread likely looked like. And I also have an illustration of what a lot of people think the showbread looked like. And so I have an image I put up, and you'll see it in the long version. And so go to that if you want to see these images. But it's like I have a table, and it's 2 stacks of 6 pancakes. And when you look at it, then yeah, it would be very reasonable to think that the Kohanim would devour all of that in one day. That if that's what was available on Shabbat, then I could see why some people believe that merely because David ate the showbread, that day was Shabbat. But if you look this up in the scriptures, it's right there, that about 5 or 6 pounds of flour, that's 2 omers, were put into each loaf of showbread. We get that from Leviticus chapter 24, verse 5. The officiating Kohanim ate up to 7 loaves, totaling about 40 pounds, before David arrived, which would have taken them about 4 days. Now, I say that because, how much bread can a man reasonably eat in one day? Well, I bring this out in the longer version. See, we take a deeper dive in the longer version. We get into more scripture, as well as getting into the visual aids. But if in the manna, the falling of the manna in Exodus chapter 16, that it talked about how when they gathered, they would gather an omer per head in the household, an omer per person. If your household had 5 people, you would gather up 5 omers. If it only had 2 people, you'd gather 2 omers. And so that shows that a reasonable amount for one man to eat in one day would be 1 omer. Well, 2 omers went into each of these 12 loaves of showbread. We're talking 5 or 6 pounds, just to give you an idea of how much bread that is. All right, in each loaf now. a typical loaf of bread from the store here in America would be about 1 pound. Now, if it was like a artisan bread, like a rustic bread like that, a heavier bread, maybe 1.5 pounds or 2 pounds like that. But here we're talking 5 or 6 pounds of flour going into each loaf of the showbread. Now, I say that the officiating Kohanim ate up to 7 loaves before David arrived, but really, I really caught myself because that when David had asked for 5 loaves, that he was asking for 5 normal loaves. He did not come expecting to get the showbread. He expected to get just ordinary bread, and so he said he wanted 5 loaves. Well, 5 loaves of ordinary bread would be equivalent to 2.5 loaves of the showbread. And so really, the Kohanim could have eaten up to 9.5 of those loaves in order for there to be enough for David and his men, because he was just asking for 5 ordinary loaves, which would be equivalent to 2.5 loaves of the showbread, because the showbread is 2 omers apiece and not 1 omer like the regular bread, like the regular grain offerings. And so, as I said, I take a deeper dive into it on the longer version. We get into more scripture. We get into more of these numbers, more of these mathematics, and then just show that it's just a fallacy to believe that the Shabbat was the only day that the showbread would have been available to eat, because there is so much of it. Now, reason number 3, there was no bread except for the showbread. In the law of the burnt offering, 1/10 of the ephah of flour, which would be an omer, or 2.5 to 3 pounds, was mixed with oil for the daily grain offering, which was offered twice daily. We see that from Numbers chapter 28, verses 3 through 8. The grain offering was given to the Kohanim to eat once the remembrance portion was given to Yahweh. That's Leviticus chapter 7, verses 9 and 10. On the Shabbat, the burnt offering with the grain offering was doubled and performed in addition to the daily offering. So that's Numbers chapter 28, verses 3 through 9. With the omer of flour for both the morning and the evening daily offering, in the 2 omers for the Shabbat offering, there would have been a lot of other bread present on the Shabbat. So a lot of bread present even outside of the 12 loaves of showbread. With 3 to 4 officiating Kohanim, or priests, eating from the showbread, the grain offerings, and possibly peace offerings. We get that from Leviticus chapter 7, verses 29 through 34, in Ezekiel 46, verse 12. It is highly unlikely that there would be no bread there except the showbread if that day were the Shabbat. That day was an ordinary day. Now, reason number 4, David traveled extensively that day, both to Nob and after departing from there. Now, as I mentioned before, he traveled extensively, and the priest knew he was traveling extensively, and he didn't say anything to him about it. He didn't put him in check, for doing so. Now, he went to Gath that day, and that's chapter 21, verse 10, then to the cave of Adullam, chapter 22, verse 1, then to Moab, chapter 22, verse 3. Now, as far as that day, and I go into this in the longer teaching, that we can reasonably say that he went to Gath and the cave of Adullam on that very day, the same day that he came into Nob and then left. Now, his family came down to meet him while he was in the cave of Adullam, and so that, there may have been some time that elapsed between the cave of Adullam and Moab, but for sure Gath and the cave of Adullam, that these travels took place on the same day. Now he told the Kohen that he had traveled there, sent his men away, and that he was leaving to go elsewhere. Like I said, he wasn't put in check for it by the Kohen. Now, for those who accept Jubilees as being inspired, I'm going to say this. And every man who does any work thereon, or goes on a journey, or tills his farm, whether in his house or any other place, or whoever lights a fire, or rides on any beast, or travels by ship on the sea, and whoever strikes or kills anything, or slaughters a beast or a bird, or whoever catches an animal or a bird or a fish, or whoever fasts or makes war on the Sabbaths, the man who does any of these things on the Sabbath shall die. So that the children of Israel shall observe the Sabbaths according to the commandments regarding the Sabbaths of the land, as it is written in the tablets, which he gave into my hands, that I should write out for thee the laws of the seasons, and the seasons according to the division of their days. That's Jubilees chapter 50, verses 12 and 13. Of course, I have highlighted here, goes on a journey. So if you believe Jubilees, then you would have to believe that journeying on the Shabbat is a sin. And we see David doing extensive journeying, extensive traveling on the Shabbat. Now, I know the stock response, the stock answer to that, well, David was running for his life. He was running from Shaul, so it's understandable that he would have been traveling extensively that day. Well, when you see the bonus and what I bring out in the bonus, you'll see why that stock answer falls flat and holds no water. Now, reason number five, when Yahusha mentioned David eating the showbread and connected it with the Talmudim, the disciples, rubbing heads of grain in their hands and eating it on Shabbat, the connection he was making was to the alleged unlawful eating when hungry in both cases, and not to Shabbat. So that was the whole point he was making, was that both the Talmudim and David were engaged in an unlawful activity of eating when they were hungry. Okay, that's what they had in common, not Shabbat. So let's look at what the passage says on that. And at that time, Yahusha went through the grain fields on the Shabbat, and his Talmudim were hungry and began to pluck heads of grain to eat. And when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, "Look, your Talmudim are doing what is not right to do on the Shabbat." But he said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he was hungry, he and those who were with him, how he went into the house of Elohim and ate the showbread, which was not right for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the Kohanim?" That's out of Matthew chapter 12, verses 1 through 4. You can compare that with Mark 2, 23 through 28, and Luke 6, 1 through 5. So when you look at this passage, does it say anywhere in here that David did this on the Shabbat? And you see clearly by looking at this passage what the connection he was making was. It was the connection between the Talmudim rubbing the grains to eat them on the Shabbat and David eating the showbread. Both of them were alleged unlawful cases of eating when they were hungry. Praise Yahuwah. So the comparison had nothing to do with the Shabbat. Now, the bonus that I've been telling you about. There is a day near the new moon celebration of 1 Samuel chapter 20 that is a better candidate for the Shabbat. And so in this short version, and especially in the longer version, I encourage you to dig into that if you haven't already. So the 5 reasons why David did not eat the showbread on the Shabbat. Please check that out if you haven't already. But the allegation is that the day that David ate the showbread was the Shabbat. Therefore, there's been a Shabbat identified that doesn't fall on the synchronized dates of the 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th of the lunar month. Well, because the 29th is one of the synchronized dates for the Shabbat, and the 29th always comes before the new moon celebration, whether it is a one-day celebration or a two-day celebration. The 29th day Shabbat always comes beforehand. And so what we need to do is we need to look at the chapter before 1 Samuel chapter 20, when they did have the two-day new moon celebration, to see what's going on here and to see if it is a better candidate than 1 Samuel 21, when David went to Nob and ate the showbread. Now, we're going to look at the backdrop of this. And Jehonathan declared to David, saying, "My father Shaul seeks to put you to death. And now please be on your guard until morning, and dwell in secrecy and hide." 1 Samuel chapter 19, verse 2. And Shaul sent messengers to David's house to watch him and to put him to death in the morning. And Michal, David's wife, informed him, saying, "If you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you are put to death." Verse 11. All right, so before I read this here, I will say that it was made crystal clear to David that Shaul was coming after him to kill him. There is no question about it. That's why I gave that backdrop before I read from verse 18 to the rest of the chapter, and then the first verse of the next chapter. Now David fled and escaped, and went to Shemuel at Ramah, and told him all that Shaul had done to him. So Shemuel knows exactly what's going on. And he and Shemuel went and dwelt at Nawith. And it was reported to Shaul, saying, "See, David is in Nawith and Ramah." So Shaul sent messengers to take David. And they saw the assembly of the Nebaim Nabal. They saw the prophets prophesying. And Shemuel standing as leader over them. And the Ruach of Elohim came upon the messengers of Shaul, and they also Nabu, they also prophesied. And when Shaul was told, he sent other messengers, and they Nabu likewise, they prophesied too. So Shaul sent messengers again the third time, and they Nabu also, they also prophesied. Then he himself went to Ramah, and came to the great well that is at Seku, and he asked and said, "Where are Shemuel and David?" And one said, "There in Nawith in Ramah." So he went there to Nawith in Ramah, and the Ruach of Elohim was upon him too. And he went on in Nabu, or he prophesied, until he came to Nawith in Ramah. And he also stripped off his garments in Nabu before Shemuel, and lay down naked all that day and all that night. Therefore they say, "Is Shaul also among the Nebaim, the prophets?" And David fled from Nawith in Ramah, and went and said to Jehonathan, "What have I done? What is my wickedness, and what is my sin before your father, that he seeks my life?" Praise Yahuwah. So we see that's the first verse of chapter 20, 1 Samuel. Now, there's a couple different schools of thought here concerning which, with those of us who believe in the synchronized dates for the Shabbat, that there are some of us who believe that that David kept the Shabbat there with Shemuel, and then when the sun went down, he went to talk to Jehonathan. Because keep in mind now that Ramah and then Gibeah, where Shaul lived, it was about, if you look it up, it was about 3 or 4 miles apart. It was a very short distance. And so it wouldn't have taken very long at all for David to, after Shabbat, after the sun would go down, to go on up to Gibeah and talk to Jehonathan. And then there are those who believe that when he came and talked to Jehonathan, that it was in broad daylight. And so that day would have been the Shabbat. Well, I am of the school of thought that he kept the Shabbat when he was right there in Nawith of Ramah. And also what I want to bring out was that this day is a better candidate for being the Shabbat than the day he went to Nob and ate the showbread. And I'm going to show you why. We're going to compare and contrast these 2 days. We're going to compare and contrast the day he went to Nob and ate the showbread, 1 Samuel 21, and then the day he was running from Shaul, knowing that he was running to kill him, and went to Shemuel in Nawith, in Ramah, and then they both went to Nawith in Ramah. So which day was the better candidate for the Shabbat? David's last day with Shemuel in Nawith of Ramah, or the day he ate the showbread in Nob? In both cases, David knew that Shaul was pursuing him to kill him. While at Nob, he was in and out rather quickly and running for his life, whereas at Nawith, he stayed put, although Shaul sent 3 messengers and even came there himself. The Most High supernaturally protected David while he stayed put in Nawith, although his pursuers were upon him, whereas we see no supernatural protection in Nob. Questions. Why did David stay put even though Shaul and his messengers were pursuing him to kill him? Why didn't Shemuel send him away to safety? Why would the Most High supernaturally protect him in Nawith but not in Nob? Could it be because David was resting on the Shabbat? So think about it, brothers and sisters. Isn't that odd? Just about every time you see Shaul pursuing David, David's on the run. Somebody's protecting him. Somebody's telling him, hey, you better get out of here. Hey, you better flee. Hey, Shaul's coming. And so probably with the exception of the times when he'd sneak up on him in the cave, that he was usually just a few steps ahead of Shaul and he was on the run. But isn't that peculiar that 3 messengers came from Shaul, and Shaul came himself, and David did not move? David stayed put. Why would he be staying put? And so on top of him staying put rather than running for his life like he was when he went to Nob, and this would have been, now when he went to Nob, he either went straight from meeting Yehonathan on the new moon to Nob, or it would have been perhaps 3 days later, because when he said that the men have kept themselves from women these 3 days since we've come out, that could have either been the 3 days starting from when he first talked to Yehonathan before the new moon, or it could have been after he left Yehonathan after the new moon, like that. And so it's not crystal clear when the 3 days starts and ends on that. But what is crystal clear was that it was a 2-day new moon celebration in 1 Samuel chapter 20. And so, as I said before, those of us who believe the synchronized dates for the Shabbat, the 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th, we believe that David kept the Shabbat before the new moon celebration of 1 Samuel chapter 20. So which one of those days was the Shabbat? And I had pointed out just what I believe about that, because it doesn't tell us verbatim, but what I believe and what I see the scripture clearly bringing out is that this is a much better candidate for the Shabbat than his time in Nob, for the reasons that I outline here. That here, the enemy is right upon him and he stays put. Why would he stay put like that? If we're to give any credence to what I read from Jubilees, how it's a sin to journey on the Shabbat, could it be that he reverenced the Shabbat so greatly that he refused to run for his life, even though the enemies were upon him? And then we see the supernatural protection of the Most High. of David when he stayed put in Nawith. We don't see this kind of supernatural protection when he was in Nob. Could it be that the Most High saw David's reverence for the Shabbat and protected him so that he could keep the Shabbat in shalom like that? Could it be that that was the reason why that the Most High supernaturally protected David and did not let Shaul and his messengers get to him, even though they were right at the doorsteps? So why did the Most High protect him like that? And so we see he stayed put. He was supernaturally protected by the Most High, praise Yahuwah. And we see that this is right before he goes to meet with Yehonathan when they said, tomorrow is the new moon. Tomorrow is the new moon celebration. And so that is a much better candidate for the Shabbat, brothers and sisters. Praise Yahuwah. Because like I said, in comparing and contrasting, at Nob, he's on the run. He was on the run to Nob. He was on the run from Nob. He went to a couple different places even. Praise Yahuwah. For one, and then we see no supernatural protection. That, if David had a mind to keep the Shabbat in Nob with the priests and whatnot, we don't see any type of like supernatural protection or the Most High stopping Shaul or anything like that. We just see David coming and David going like that. And so it's a much better candidate for the Shabbat that we see in 1 Samuel 19 than we see in 1 Samuel chapter 21. So brothers and sisters, there it is. This is the short version of David and the Showbread. And once again, if you haven't seen the long version, if you haven't seen the 5 reasons why David did not eat the Showbread on the Shabbat, please go in and check it out, because I take a deeper dive into the 5 reasons. I bring out more scripture. I bring out illustrations, and I bring it out. Now, the basics are there. The basics are in this video here for sure. But, I really, close a lot of the gaps in the longer version. So check that out if you haven't already. And I thank you for going through this short version. And please help me get the word out. Like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to my channel. And with that, I will say, Shalom.